Hi, Ralph. How you doing?
Hey there, Roger. Good to see you.
Good to see
I'm doing
you.
fine.
So, Ralph, you're planning a Portugal Esoteric Quest, June 2023.
Correct. First 2 weeks of June next year, we will be in Portugal, in Lisbon and Tomar for the main Esoteric Quest, and then there will be a post-conference journey along the Camino of Santiago de Compostela, taking the southern route up through Portugal to Galicia and right to the very end of the pilgrimage trail there in at the tip of the peninsula.
Well,
Fisterra.
look, Ralph, that sounds really exciting. What we'll do is we'll talk a bit more about Portugal, but for those folks who don't know you, you've been one of the founders, directors of the New York Open Center for what, nearly over 35 years?
It would be, I think it'll be 40 years on Christmas Day since I started working on the Open Center.
Right.
So it's been a long time, yeah. Which is, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's been New York's leading center of holistic learning since 1984, and it has been the sponsor of these esoteric quests up until now.
So when did you do your first esoteric quest? It was back in the 1990s, was it 1994?
Yes. 95. It was called the Rosicrucian Enlightenment Revisited on the Western Mystery Tradition in Bohemia, and it took place in the Southern Bohemian mecca of alchemists, a little town called Český Krumlov.
I know it well.
Yeah, it had been
The
hidden.
home of Western esoteric alchemy.
Place. That's where the quest began. It's an incredibly evocative place, and it was even more so in the early 90s, right after communism, when I stumbled across it, where it had not been touched, it had not been Disneyfied. It was pretty much a Renaissance jewel, and that's where we did the first one.
And Ralph, you've done how many now?
It's 15 or 16 if we include the one that we did after the pandemic broke out, which was online 2 years ago. We were going to do this one in Portugal, but obviously we had to postpone it. So we did an online one. I think that was the 15th or 16th.
Right.
Yeah.
Look, I know I've been involved for at least the last 10 or 12 years. I thought, I'll just share my screen here, and we'll just quickly roll through some of the past esoteric quests, just to give people the flavor, this
absolutely.
sort of this amazing lineage that you've developed here with these esoteric quests. Let me just give me a second here. I'll get this up into full.
It's great to see all these images. It's taking me back to so many wonderful events we've had.
Let's just go to now this isn't any particular order. Just go back here. Just beautiful images from these brochures. So yes, you've done well and truly over a dozen esoteric quests. And
shall I? Do you want to keep on flipping through?
No, I just want to get to the beginning. Of this.
Okay.
There we go. So it's a random. It's not in any particular order, but yeah. Let's. We'll just sort of quickly take us on a little. Esoteric, the shortest esoteric journey you've ever done.
Yeah, so you don't have to leave your armchair or your screen. Yes, so this is one we did, as you can see, in 2013 in Sicily. And we've looked at, both ancient Sicily when it was a Greek colony and Arabic Sicily, which is not widely known. And you can see the many. Jocelyn Godwin, who has been with us many times, he'll be with us in Portugal, one of our leading scholars of Western esotericism, Christopher McIntosh. You can see lots of wonderful events here.
And you always incorporate a cultural experience, music and art.
Absolutely.
And poetry.
The four alchemical ingredients of the Esoteric Quest are the quality of the learning. We bring in the best presenters we can find. It's never dry academics. This is people who bring a period alive. Then it's the ambience, of course, actually being in these places. It's a kind of interactive memory theater. As you experience it entirely differently if you're just sitting in a lecture room hearing about this or looking at a computer rather than being there. Of course, you can see here ancient Alexandria. That was an outstanding quest that we did. We had to postpone it a year because of the revolution, but we were one of the very few groups of visitors in Egypt at that time, and we will never forget that one. Birthplace of the Western mind, the birthplace of so many elements of the Western tradition. Yeah. So yeah, so the ingredients then are the learning, the ambience, the culture. We always do music, dance, theater, poetry, and then of course the conviviality. This is yeah, we're still in Alexandria.
The food, wine, and song.
Food, wine, song. Many lifelong friends have been made. Italian Renaissance and the esoteric traditions.
I can say that
it's been an incredibly rich and full journey. Yeah, look at that. 2000 Hermetic, Kabbalistic, Neoplatonic philosophers.
Yeah.
In Italy.
Florence, 2000.
Florence. Oh, that was a great one. There you see the dome. Yeah, all of these outstanding experiences.
And this is one of the earlier ones, 2006.
Yes, that was 2006. That's right. That was a moving quest where we started off in a Bohemian alchemical town, not Český Krumlov, and moved west to Weimar. And there's Goethe, and that's the house where he wrote Faust. And there's Marienbad, Mariansky Lajny up there. And there's Goethe and Schiller down below.
Yeah.
And we always do afternoon activities. We do a pre-conference experience. We do a post-conference journey. You can see this one here, the Golden Age of Andalusia, Sufis, Kabbalists, Christian philosophers in medieval Spain. We did that in Granada, the wonderful Granada.
And that was the first one that I started to attend.
That was the first one I came to, yeah. You can see the Sufis there and the Kabbalists.
And we must say we do have a good esoteric library because I actually have been filming them ever since there.
Yes,
plus we did some, you know, some digitalization of some of the early recordings that you did on the old-fashioned technology down in Český Krumlov. So there is a esoteric Quest library that folks can join. So let's have a look. This is one of the earlier ones, 1998.
This was the third one that we did in Wales there on the Grail and the Arthurian myths and that whole stream. The fairy traditions. Yeah, look at all this. Wow, what a flashback.
Yeah, that was a fantastic.
Yes, this was about 2010, was it? Something like that.
2008.
808 was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, on the island of Samothrace that you're seeing there in the background there, one of the great centers of the mysteries, comparable to Delphi in many ways for 1,000 years, one of the great mystery centers there. So that was outstanding. And then we followed it with a journey to the Sufi and Byzantine worlds of Istanbul, and then down to Idime and Ephesus and so on. Yes, it was an amazing experience.
And then you did one in New York State.
We did one in New York State because we had the crash, you remember, in 2008. Nobody was in a position to go abroad. So we did upstate New York, and that was a wonderful quest. I mean, upstate New York, there, of course, we're seeing Emerson and some of the remarkable figures. There's Martin Luther King, Pascal Beverly Randolph, Saul Bellow, who was deeply into Rudolf Steiner. Yes, all of these things. And then, yeah, we haven't just done the Mediterranean. Of course, Iceland. I think that was a wonderful quest. In Heknar out in the Snæfellsnes Peninsula on the west coast of Iceland. You just got to come out of the airport in Iceland and you're in an altered state of consciousness. There's such a sense of profound serenity there. Yes, look at it. The runes, whale watching, sagas. Yeah, wow.
And the
Yes,
Cathars of South France.
Cathars, troubadours, Cathars, Templars, who we'll do a lot more of in Portugal next year, and the Grail. So, what a rich time this is in the south of France before the terrible Albigensian Crusades sent against the Cathars. These wonderful Gnostic Christians. And yeah, there's Lastur, the great Cathar castle that we visited. Many great Cathar castles. And that's the first time Yuri Stoyanov joined us, I think, the extraordinary Bulgarian scholar who I believe will be with us in Portugal as well, who knows more about Gnostic and Manichaean traditions than just about anybody else around. So yeah, so is that our tour of the prior?
So that gives folks an idea of the powerful lineage of the esoteric quest that you've created over 20 odd years. So I've got here your presentation. Let me just get it live about Portugal. So this is happening in 2023, and you're going to have a lot of details ready by the end of the year.
Yes, by the end of the year we will have it all done, the website and so on. And we'll be letting people know. So yeah.
So take us. So you've been over to Portugal a couple of times now, kind of coordinating this.
Yes.
And that's the thing I've noticed, that you really do a lot of deep research, and you go to these places beforehand and sort out all the logistics, get to know the people, the tour operators, the hotels, the food. It's pretty much fully catered usually, isn't it? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner's all lined up. You don't have to think about anything.
No, all you got to do is go deeply into the spiritual wisdom of the esoteric quest, because of course we're bringing alive the lost spiritual history of the West, or should we say the half forgotten in many cases. We're following that golden thread. We know that within the holistic world, should we say, there's been a lot of emphasis upon yoga, Buddhism, shamanism, etc. But the Western tradition in Europe, North Africa, etc., has been somewhat marginalized, and that's why I began doing these events back in 1995 in the last century. And as we were saying earlier, we did the very first one in the wonderful and highly evocative town of Český Krumlov, the Southern Bohemian mecca of alchemists. And then since then, it's been an extraordinary journey. It's been incredibly rich. So let me talk about what we're going to do in June. It'll be the first, I've almost fixed everything, but it's very likely it's going to start on the 2nd of June. And we will meet in, can we go to the next slide?
Yeah.
There we go. Just slightly didn't come out so well. But that is Lisbon. And this is actually part of the view that we will see from the place we're going to be staying in Lisbon, in the Hotel Fernando Pessoa. Now, those of you who are familiar with Portugal and Portuguese culture would know Pessoa. I did not know him until I began to research this quest. He's really Portugal's wonderful national poet. And he's somebody who considered himself a contemporary Knight Templar. He was deeply into astrology. He created literary forms that are unprecedented, and developed each of his characters, his heteronyms, as he called them, out of their astrological chart. So anyway, we will be in Lisbon here. We'll fly in. We'll have 2 nights in Lisbon, and
of course, Lisbon is pretty much one of the oldest cities in Europe. It was around even before Rome, 2 centuries before Rome.
Yes, that's right. It's a really ancient city. I think it's even mentioned in some of the old Greek stories. Some of the Greek hero, I don't think it was Hercules. Who was it? I'm not sure who it was. One of the legendary figures of Greek myth is said to have visited Portugal. or Lusitania, or Lusitania as it was known during the period of the Roman occupation. So it's a city with a deep history. Of course, Portugal itself is a fairly new country. It didn't come into being in the 12th until the 12th century. They had
but in those days, Ralph, it's one of the longest established countries, so to speak,
Yeah.
In the 12th century, because
Right.
back then you
Yeah.
had tribes, and there wasn't anything of like Germany, and France was, divided up into several areas. So it's technically one of the oldest countries in Europe as well, isn't it?
It's had clearly defined boundaries.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's at the oldest border of any country in Europe.
Yes.
But of course, Al-Andalus was Muslim for centuries, 6 centuries, right up until there was that band of Christian states and kingdoms in the north of Portugal, like Catalonia and so on. But most of the peninsula was Islamic, and then gradually you had the Reconquista, and Portugal reemerged at the beginning of the 12th century, really not long after the Crusades. 1099 was the first crusade there. So yes, it has quite a history, Portugal. We, unlike Bulgaria, which we didn't show, that was the last esoteric quest that we did. Bulgaria and the Plovdiv, the most ancient city in Europe. Now that's really an ancient city. That's 6,000 years old. But Bulgaria was very much off the beaten track. We heard virtually no English in 2 weeks there, those of us who did the whole thing. And it was amazing to go back to the world of Thrace, the birthplace of the mysteries, as Herodotus had it. Anyway, back to Lisbon here.
And
it's a wonderful city.
Just a little side note: Lisbon actually has one of the oldest bookstore on the planet. Did you know that?
Is that right?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to sneak that one in.
I meant to go there, but I never got around to it. So,
okay.
We will be having an evening. Dinner the second night will be this view from out of the deck of the hotel where we'll be having dinner. We will see this view looking across it. That's a Moorish castle, of course, built during the Andalusian period, and the Tagus River there that we see below us that opens out into the Atlantic Ocean, because of course the Portuguese were the first great explorers.
Well, they were the first empire builders, from the west, so to speak.
Yes, that's right. Should we go to the next image, Roger?
Do that one, yeah.
That is the poet I was mentioning. We will be having an evening presentation on his life. As I mentioned, he's an esoteric poet. Unusual guy, in his lifetime he only published one book, but when he died they found a chest in his apartment with 25,000 manuscripts, and he'd created all kinds of literary forms. And you can see, if you go to his library or the museum, how deeply he was into so many of the matters that we pursuers of the esoteric quest also share. So Pessoa will be very much an inspiring element during some of our time in Lisbon. If we go on to the next one, Roger. That is that day we're in Lisbon, one of our options. We'll arrive there, we'll just have the night, we'll have dinner because people will be jet lagged. There is a Sufi exhibition with the Gulbenkian Museum. We'll have an option to go to that first afternoon, but we'll just chill out, have dinner in Lisbon that first night, the 2nd of June. The next day we'll have an option. One will be to go out here. This is where the Tagus River opens out into the Atlantic. So this is where the great explorers of the age of discovery, inspired by Henry the Navigator, this legendary figure who was actually the Grand Master of the successor of the Knights Templar, the Order of Christ, whose headquarters or stronghold was in Tomar, which will be the main base of the conference. So yes, this is the Belém Tower that really guards the entranceway to the Tagus River and to and to Lisbon. So right next to it is the Jeronimos Monastery, an extraordinary creation filled with alchemical symbolism. So our second day, the third, one option will be to go out to this part of Lisbon where the Jeronimos and the Belém Tower are, and it harks back to the age of discovery. The other one, Roger, if we can go on to the next slide, is Sintra, which anybody, if you search, just Google, esoteric Portugal, it's probably the first thing that will come up.
Right.
It's about 45 minutes outside Lisbon. This will be another option on the first day. And it's filled, a lot of it was built in the 18th century by Portuguese Freemasons at a time when Masonry was not, a business social group as it seems to be in many ways these days, but it actually had a genuine philosophical, spiritual, and esoteric dimension. So Sintra is filled with castles, wells, ancient wells of initiation, all kinds of remarkable phenomena. And there is a guy called Manuel Gandra. If you Google him too, you'll see that he's written more books on the esoteric dimensions of Portugal than just about anybody else. He's a lovely guy. I've had the good fortune of meeting him a few times. So he'll be taking us out to Sintra. So that's one of the two options. Then in the evening, we come home. When I say home, we'll be at the Pessoa Hotel that evening of the 3rd. There'll be that 1-hour presentation on the life of Pessoa. And then we're going to have a little concert. It'll just be brief, probably just 3 or 4 songs, but we want to give people a taste of fado. Now, those of you, one of Portugal's most celebrated exports is fado, the incredible music of Portugal. Because the Portuguese, were the first to travel so far to Brazil, to Mozambique, to what is now Indonesia, they had that longing, that melancholy, that yearning to be back. And Fado, one of the branches of Fado, was established in the Alfama district of Lisbon, where some of the sailors would return. The sailors, the taverns, the ladies of the tavern, shall we call it, and the longing, the stranded sailor, thousands of leagues away, dreaming of Maria back in his village, how he would either die on a foreign shore or return and marry Maria. Anyway, Fado is sensational music, incredibly soulful, and it really articulates a unique Portuguese phenomenon called saudade, S-A-U-D-A-D-E, saudade, or it's pronounced differently in Brazil or in the Cape Verde Islands. Some of you would know that song by Cesaria Evora, Saudade. It's really about, it conveys that soul. She's from the Cape Verde Islands, which is a Portuguese area. So, colonized by the Portuguese. So anyway, that will be our first day, first and second day in Lisbon. Let's go on to the next one, Roger. And that came out slightly blurry, but that is the great Templar stronghold of Tomar. And so on the third day, on the 4th of June, we will take a bus. It's about a 2-hour drive up into north central Portugal to the historic town of Tomar. Now here you see their great castle built by the Templars. And the whole city will be staying in the Hotel dos Templarios, a really charming hotel next to a little river with fountains and very evocative with a castle up above us. It's somewhat reminiscent in a way of the very first quest where we did Český Krumlov in Bohemia. There we had an alchemical castle, literally, of the Rosenberg brothers above us, and this time we have a Templar castle. Now, the Knights Templar, as I'm sure many of us know, was an order established to protect the pilgrim routes to the Holy Land, and established just 10 or 15 years after the first crusade. And they built a temple on the site of what was thought to be the Temple of Solomon. And so the Templars were always very supportive of the Jewish community. In fact, Tomar has the oldest synagogue in the whole of Portugal. So they built their temple, and they felt very attuned to the ancient wisdom of Solomon, the ancient wisdom traditions, the sacred geometry that Roger is into, and Scott and many other people. This would have been part of the whole Templar wisdom. They also made contact with Sufis there. And so they were a remarkable, mysterious. They're mysterious. Rudolf Steiner, the great esoteric philosopher, has many profound things to say about them. But they were highly respected. Because they helped people, they invented the first finance system. Because if you were going off on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, you're not going to carry diamonds or silver with you. You want a promissory note from the Templars. Their integrity was respected. So they were creating a whole different approach to finance. In fact, it's been said that if they had not been suppressed, we would not have the grotesque global financial system that we have today. It's an interesting and provocative thought. But anyway, yes, we'll have many presentations, both from our native English speakers and from some of the Portuguese presenters on the mystery of the Knights Templar. Now, they were, many of us will know, they were horribly suppressed for about 200 years at the beginning of the 14th century by a conspiracy between the French king, Philip IV, and the Pope, who was under the control of the French king in Avignon at that time. The Pope wasn't even in Rome. So there was a horrible attack on the Templars. They were suppressed throughout Europe, really.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this was playing. This is part of Portugal, unlike Bulgaria. You know, we thought, well, that really is another world, and I loved it. It was fascinating. But Portugal, we think, oh, we know Portugal. Yes, that place next to Spain. But no, we don't know Portugal. Portugal was described to Jocelyn Godwin by Antoine Fevre, the professor of esotericism at the Sorbonne quite a few years ago, as the most esoterically alive country in Europe. And so you see people like Pessoa, the poet, also other figures like Limo de Freitas, the great esoteric painter that Jocelyn will be talking about. But also, if you go back to the early years of Portugal, the king of Portugal was a troubadour. King Denis was a troubadour. And he was able to work out an arrangement with the Pope after the Templars were so horribly suppressed everywhere else in Europe to come back, to return. Which, as I was saying, I had no idea about this, even though I've been interested in the Templars for a long time. And so they returned. They had to come up with a new name. They called themselves the Knights of Christ. And of course, you know, as I was mentioning, their Grand Master was Henry the Navigator. In fact, when we visit the castle here, we will see the private quarters of Henry the Navigator, whose navigational school right down there on the coast of Portugal drew on a lot of Arabic maps, Jewish scholarship, because, you know, they were the first to head out and explore the whole world. And of course, we've got to remember this was the Middle Ages, and the Templars were a crusading order. So their goal was they thought they could go around the south of Africa. They had no idea it went as far south as it did, and come up the other side and connect with the legendary figure that they thought was historically real, Prester John. He was supposed to be a great Christian king with great wealth and great armies, and they were going to take the Muslim armies from the rear, as it were, because we have to remember this is the 15th century, and Constantinople was under severe threat from the Turkish forces. So the idea was to relieve Constantinople by connecting with Prester John. Of course, it didn't happen. And, you know, that we have to, in the 21st century here, of course, you know, we need to be aware of the fact that there's a dark side to all of this as well. And that there was, you know, the beginning of colonialism, imperialism, there was slavery, there was gold. It was not it was a mix. It was the Middle Ages, so we
Yeah.
need to bear that in mind, and while we also explore the esoteric dimensions of this. So that's where we're going to be. We will be in Tomar for 4 days, the main body of the conference, after the 2 days in Lisbon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a beautiful little town. You know, it's pedestrian only. It's very evocative. It's a hip town too. There's lovely little cafes. There are restaurants that are highly evocative. In the middle of the town is the statue of the Templar who founded the city or the town. And yeah, as I was saying earlier, you know, our magic, our alchemy, it's the learning, it's the ambience, but it's also the art. So we will, and the culture. So there will be evenings. We'll have a full evening of Fado, a couple of great musicians, Rodrigo and Tanya, that I met, who will speak about the origins of Fado, the incredible soul force that it carries. If any of you can get hold of a DVD called Fados, Fados, it's the most evocative. You come out of watching that hour-long program by a great Spanish film director, Carlos Saurez, and you're in an altered state of consciousness. It really takes you into the world of soul. So we'll have an evening of that, and many other things. So that's our main conference in Lisbon and in Tomar. And then we will journey on to, and of course, these things are all optional.
And with the main conference, you have several presenters from not only Portugal, but from overseas.
Yes, we do. Yes. So, so I've mentioned Jocelyn Godwin, who is certainly one of the most knowledgeable people that we have. Some of you will know Paul Bembridge, who's been at many quests. He will be speaking about the Knights Templar. He will also be speaking about Priscillian, a very intriguing figure that I've been learning a lot about. Priscillian was a 4th century esoteric Christian philosopher who gathered a whole major following in Galicia, in northwest Spain, which is where Santiago de Compostela is. He believed in the complete equality of men and women. And this was really before, you know, Constantine had pronounced Christianity as the imperial religion. But, you know, Spain, Portugal, it was it was the Wild West. It was way out there. So it took a while for that orthodoxy to arrive. So Priscillian was able to flourish before his work was finally suppressed. But it's a fascinating story, one that we're not really familiar with. And we would see him as part of that whole, I'm hoping that Yuri Stoyanov, he and I have just been in touch. You know, Yuri is always the remarkable Bulgarian scholar, author of the hidden tradition of Europe, about the Manichaean tradition. They did call themselves the Holy Religion of Light, the first world religion that went both east and west along the Silk Road.
That's an incredible story just there, Ralph, because hardly anybody knows about that.
No, I mean, you got to be Yuri, you got to be Bulgarian to know this. Certainly, it's an incredible story.
It was a huge movement, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was enormous. I mean, just think in the 13th century, the Holy Religion of Light, the first world religion that combined Christianity, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism. In the middle, it was more Christian to the west, more Zoroastrian in the middle, and more Taoist, because it stretched all the way to China, believe it or not, or Taoist when it went all the way down into China. So you have to imagine this arc of the Holy Religion of Light stretching all the way from Southeast China to Southwest Europe in the Middle Ages. It's a truly extraordinary thing. I had no idea. It's not part of conventional history. But Yuri is one of those people like Jocelyn and like the wonderful Christopher Bamford, who we just lost recently, who was with us on many quests, and others like Leonard George. I won't try to name them all, who will definitely be with us, and who just have big encyclopedic minds and can tell us all about this. So Paul Bembridge will be speaking about Priscillian and the Knights Templar. Leonard George, one of our regular presenters, who's been with us ever since Florence. He will be speaking about ancient Iberia, you know, I don't know how many of you have noticed that just recently, right on the southern border of Spain and Portugal, they've discovered a vast megalithic site with 3,000 or so standing stones, not quite comparable in size to Karnak in Brittany, but up there, completely new, utterly unknown. So Leonard is going to do sort of ancient and classical Iberia, but he's also going to do, for those of us, some of you will have noticed there, the Great One conference, the Great Quest we did in Florence, on 15th century Florence, and the Platonic Academy of Marsilio Ficino, where all of these spiritual streams came together, the first holistic center in the world, you might say, where Christianity, Judaism, Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, all of these things stream together. We're going to have, Leonard is going to speak about the influence of Ficino in Portugal in the 15th century. So that's truly remarkable. There's really going to be some very innovative presentations here that nobody has heard before. But that's what we do. You know, we go into this is, you know, we do find the best people on this material, and I have to really appreciate all the presenters, the research. I mean, people just pour the best of their heart and their souls and their scholarship into this. And I say again, this is not a dry academic thing. The goal of these quests is to bring these periods alive, because they're an integral part of our soul history. Certainly, especially those who, like myself, who have a European background. But really everybody, it's part of world history. So yeah, we'll have Ficino and his influence on Portugal, the influence of Neoplatonism and so on. We'll be looking at Fabrizio Boscaglia, who is our main contact. He's helping me a lot with the logistics. He's a professor at the Lusitanian University in Lisbon. He's an expert on Sufism, on Portuguese Sufism. So he will be there. Paulo Borges, he's written 7 books, I believe, on the great poet Fernando Pessoa, and he will be speaking about saudade, the whole Portuguese experience of soul. Marjorie Roth, who has been with us many, many times too, who is a musicologist. She and Leonard, who are married, they met at the Quest in Florence. I always have to put that in. But they are just working on a new book about esotericism and music, and Marjorie will be speaking about the songs of the pilgrims as they walked along the Camino. What did they sing? And what was the music that inspired them? And of course, you know, the Camino came up through Tomar. There's a wonderful chapel right in this castle that we're looking at here, which was a central place for the pilgrims to stop and meditate and so on. And yeah, so the whole phenomenon of pilgrimage. Of course, the Camino of Santiago de Compostela is probably the most well-traveled pilgrim route in the West. Of course, in India and so on, you would have other places where you've got thousands and thousands of people doing it. But in the West, this is still a very active pilgrimage route, although I didn't know until I went to Portugal that there was a route coming up from the south that passes through Tomar. So we will set off Tomar, and let's see, I think that's probably all I need to say right now about the conference proper. I'll just say the usual format for it is we have our morning presentations, which are lectures to everybody. Early afternoon, people, it's free time, or you can take a guided tour of the castle, the synagogue. The town itself is lovely. There are usually afternoon workshops from 4:30 to 6:30. Then dinner, the first dinner, we will be in the castle for the first dinner, and we'll be in very atmospheric restaurants for the rest of the time there. And then in the evening, we'll have a performance of fado or dance. So that's the basic structure of the day. Then those who want to can return. If it's a 2-hour journey on the train, or back to Lisbon, if people want to just do that. And then for those of us who do the whole thing, we will set off from Tomar along the Camino. And so this is just an image. We won't try, you know, it's quite a journey, but I don't know how many, there's a film actually with Martin Sheen called The Camino, which is very moving. I found that a really excellent film. we'll have to recommend it in the next Quest News to give people a taste of what this is about. It's still very much a contemporary healing journey. We're going to be driving.
He walks it with his sons or something, doesn't he? From memory.
Yeah, that's right. He loses. I think he loses his son in some tragedy or the other, and then he sets off on the Camino to heal himself.
Yeah.
And he starts off, I think, very angry, very frustrated, very cynical, and has a transformative journey along the Camino. So yeah, even though we're going to be driving, everybody wants to walk. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people want to walk a little bit of it.
Sure.
So we're going to we'll figure out a way. We're working on this right now to drop people off in the morning or after lunch or whatever, so that they can walk.
Good idea.
I think everybody wants to think, look, I walked at least 5 miles or something.
Yeah.
Of the Camino. I'm not going to be I didn't drive the whole way. So we'll have a taste of walking it, and our first night we will spend in the Douro Valley, the Douro, Douro Valley, the beautiful ancient wine growing district of Portugal, because everybody's heard of port and Vinho Verde. But yes, a visit, unless you're a teetotaler, a visit to Portugal is not complete without a few glasses of their fine wine.
It's their national drink, port.
Yeah, that's right. Because it comes from the Porto, the city is the trade between England and Portugal in port wine in the Renaissance was a strong one. So we'll stop up in the Douro Valley and probably in a beautiful vineyard or farmhouse for a night there. We'll go on to Porto, which is a really evocative place, really one of the most magical cities in Europe. We may visit the synagogue there. There's so much to do. It's filled with history, Porto. We'll go on from there to, there's a little town called Pontevedra, which is just inside the Galician-Spanish border. It looks very beautiful. It's at an estuary. It's a small town of just 80,000 as the river opens out into the ocean. But of course, Portugal is, it's the western face of Europe as it looks out on the world. And Pessoa had many poetic things to say about that, the destiny of Portugal on many levels. So we'll stop at Pontevedra, we'll have a night there. Then we'll go on to Santiago itself, Santiago de Compostela, which is quite a sight. It dates as a pilgrimage center from the 9th century. That's when the bones of James, the brother of Jesus, were said to have been discovered, and that's what started the whole massive wave of pilgrimage. But actually, there are a number of sources that point to a much older tradition there, that there was a mystery school out there on the tip of Galicia for centuries before the 9th century. And of course, Priscillian was there back in the 4th century. So this is, when I was there 2.5 years ago, it was freezing. It was January, and icy wind was blowing down these little medieval streets in Santiago, and you duck into a doorway, and they're playing Celtic music and drinking whiskey, and you go, "What? Is this the same country as Al-Andalus? With the sangria and the flamenco?" But it is. I mean, Spain is just an amazing country. So this is the Celtic part of Spain. As soon as you cross the border into Galicia, the vibe changes. It's moister. It's more hilly. And of course, Galicia in Spain, Brittany in France, Cornwall in England, and Wales, they are the Brythonic Celts, as opposed to the Gaelic Celts, the Gaels, the Scots, the Irish, and the Manx. So yes, there was a whole extraordinary, there's a lovely book called The Sea Kingdoms about all the communication between these Celtic sea kingdoms, Galicia, Brittany, Cornwall, and Wales, and so on. So we will have a night or two in Santiago. Obviously, it's got a strong religious element for those people who are into all of that. But then, because on the quest we like to go on to the real end, we like to do the whole thing. We are actually going to journey on to the true completion of the pilgrimage, which is at the tip of the Galician Peninsula in a place called Fistera, or Finisterre. Those of us like me who spent their childhood in Britain would have heard on the radio forecast, the shipping forecasts, Finisterre. So as you can tell from the French, finiterre, it's the end of the earth. So it's the very tip. So we will have a night right down there. That will be the end of our whole quest. It'll be, I think if you do the whole thing, it's 12 or 13 days. But of course you can just do segments of it if you so wish. So that's where we will have our last evening in Fisterra. And then we will take people back to Santiago, and there's an airport there in Santiago. You can fly. They have flights just about everywhere because, of course, pilgrims come from all over to Santiago. So that's about it. Roger, anything else I should address?
I think that's a lot to digest. Amazing. You know, I'm already excited about it. Let's do it.
And let me just say that right behind you, Roger, right behind your head there, even though you're sitting in New York City, I believe.
No, I'm not. I'm there. I'm there.
Oh, you're there. You're actually yeah, right. Now, by the way, Almerol, I should have mentioned behind me here. Actually, I'm in my apartment in New York, but you'd never guess it. But that is the. We'll give the game away. Actually, that's Almerol Castle behind me there, and that is an amazingly evocative Templar castle built on an island in a river. And one of the days that we're in Tomar, we're actually going to be going about half hour to a little village nearby called Barquinha, where they have the first Portuguese Hermetic museum started by a guy called Manuel Gandra. I mentioned him before. He'll be with us. And we'll have a presentation. There's a Templar interpretation center there. We'll have lunch there, and then we'll go to, there it is, Almerol Castle. For the earlier part of the afternoon before returning to Tomar for the afternoon workshops. So that's Almerol, and then where Roger is to, that is Sintra. That is in the high hills up above Sintra. You have these extraordinary palaces. Down below, you've got more of the esoteric wells and the Masonic masonry and so on. So we'll see, you know, there's a lot of visitors to Sintra. So, but Manuel says get there really early, and we will try to avoid the crowds. So yeah, so that I hope gives people a sense of,
I think it certainly does, Ralph. You know, you'll be writing all of the details and have that available pretty soon. And so just look out, you know, contact your local sponsor when you see this recording, and they'll have all the details for you.
Yes, and I would say if you'd like more information, you know, obviously we're pulling it all together right now, but you can write to quest@opencenter.org, and that will. So if you have, but you know, we'll be producing a website. And you know, in the past we have done a big, as you saw, those beautiful 12-page brochures. I think we'll probably do something like a 4-page brochure this time and point people towards the website. And what else could I say?
Well, we could basically say, look, all the information is going to be pretty much available at the beginning of 2023. And like, you know, we'd like your support and book early and get your discounts. And this is June 2023. So book those first 2 weeks, you would say, in June. Yeah, if you want to do the tour afterwards, which but most people, you know, when they come to the conference, they always do the pre-conference, you know, tour, and the most people do the post-conference tour as well. So then that's a, you know, it's a full body experience, you know. So
it is, it's full body learning, because it's not just head learning. You're actually in these locations. You take it in,
you soak it up on all so many levels.
It's kind of holistic esotericism. Say it's the whole path integrates these experiences, which is why, I mean, I can just say for me, you know, having been doing it now for like, what was it, 94 that I first worked on the Český Krumlov. I mean, 27 years or something like that. It's been, you know, one of the great gifts of my life. It's been tremendously
And well
enriching
done,
spiritually.
well done, Ralph. What you've put together over the last couple of decades is just amazing. And they just get better and better each time you do it as well. And we're already looking forward to the summer in Portugal next year.
Yeah,
so, Ralph, that's brilliant. Thanks, matey. Good catching up. And as we say, we'll keep everybody informed about this. So
yeah, and I will include a link to this in the next Quest news that will go out in the next month. So filling more people. And if you want to be on the newsletter, so you get the Quest news, just drop a line to quest@opencenter.org and we'll put you on the mailing list to receive Quest news with all the updates, including the link to this. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay, Roger, thanks so much for doing this, mate. I really appreciate it. And it'll be great. Look forward to seeing Portugal with you.
See you soon. Ciao.
Okay. Bye.